Hi, everyone. Welcome to Out of Curiosity, another episode here. Today we have a really amazing conversation that we're planning on having with two really interesting people that I think can answer a lot of the questions that I've been curious about. Today we're going to talk about the intersection between information governance and knowledge management. So I thought I'd bring some of the more expert people that I've worked with in the past around this area. Let me first introduce Robert Smallwood, and then I'll introduce my colleague and partner, Jason Thompson. So, Robert, how are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks. Appreciate your invitation.
Well, thanks for having us. And Jason, welcome to the group.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Good. So I guess let's start off with just a little bit about who you guys are. So maybe Robert, maybe if you can maybe start with you and tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and what your practice is like today.
I guess briefly, I kind of got into the content management space when I was with Wang Labs back in the late 80s, and they were the first company to come out with commercial document imaging. And they said, hey, we can handle 4 forms of information, voice, video, text, and images. And so that was really interesting to me, and I pursued that. And imaging had all these different components. Then that morphed into document management. Then that morphed into content management, enterprise content management. And then that's sort of my foundation, I suppose. I've been independent consultant for the better part of 3 decades. And I just got focused on information governance about 10 years ago. I researched and started writing reports and then converted those into books. And so since then, I've written 8 books on information governance, including a textbook. So that's been a lot of work, a lot of foundational work. And the textbook's being used at corporations, but also at universities like Oxford, uses it in the computer science department, and San Jose State, University of British Victoria. So I'm pretty proud of that. And that's a lot of work. And really just trying to shore up, galvanize, to crystallize and clarify the discipline of information governance.
Well, Bob, I got to know you through your Information Governance Institute training, and as I was preparing for my certification for my information governance professional certification through ARMA. And number one, I love your marketing. By the way, it's great marketing. It's always good content, and it's a really enjoy getting your materials. But really what kind of helped me out is as I was going through it, there's an overwhelming amount of content around just the testing and the information governance test. And I really loved both your videos and your and the materials you put together. Once I was able to digest that and put that through that, I was able to really ace my test. I just want to call that out to our audience in terms of that resource and the ability to really help me kind of really galvanize what I needed to do and prepare for the test appropriately. So thank you.
Yeah, my approach is to try to just narrow it down to the information you need to pass the exam when you're taking a prep class. So that's what I tried to do is sort of just clarify that. In the case of the IGP, I just followed their IGP exam blueprint and then recorded training videos on that. And so that's been helpful. And I don't know if you know, Jason, we have a new certification out there in information governance. It's a more advanced one called Certified Information Governance Officer, or CIGO. And I got a board together last June, and we launched this effort, the CIGO Association. And we've had companies like Delta Airlines, Hormel Foods, Honeywell, major law firms participate in the program already. Even government agencies like Freddie Mac, they sent 6 people to the training in December. So it's a more advanced class. It's more practical. It's a little more of a hands-on and updated kind of a focus versus the IGP, which is fine. I think as a starter, this is more for advanced. And we've been getting people outside of the traditional RIM space, people in data management, data governance, people in project management, people in analytics. So it's turning out to have a good amount of appeal to people beyond the records management space.
Well, cool. Well, thank you for letting us know. And by all means, please, everyone should get their chance for for their plug. So speaking of that, why don't we introduce Jason Thompson? Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, and feel free to throw out there a shameless plug about yourself and your practice.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, Jason Thompson. I've been in and around information governance, knowledge management, e-discovery for like ever since I can remember. I grew up under the table of my mother, who was designing like financial systems and dealing with data in the old hard copy state. So I got to see how filing clerks work. I got to help her with the stuff that she was designing and putting together. And I was part of that whole switchover. I was working for IBM even before I left school in bringing together how information is moving from this hard copy organized system into what we have today, which is totally unorganized, nobody doing their filing over the years, and then a lot of the time trying to expect to wave a magic wand at it and get it done, which it's a very difficult practice. And I really respect the InfoGov and that side. It's an amazingly complex area to try and handle in either way when somebody hasn't done their filing. So I moved on from there. I was consulting on my own for a while, helping out with the electronic discovery cases. I was the young guy in the room who could help lawyers go and find the information they need. So dealing with IT and understanding where the data was, in what system, how to get to backup, etc. over the years, and got very in tune with the process of how to bring the information forward, right, from a e-discovery point of view. I was then invited to join Symantec. I'm cutting corners here, but I was invited to join Symantec, where I helped develop the Discovery Accelerator front end on how legal will be utilizing that in a process to be able to get to an end result of review or whatever. And I worked with some large petroleum companies at that point, and moved over to automotive, into chemical, into pharma, into a lot of different spaces. I've really got to experience many different organizations, almost all of the verticals, right? From there, I was always interested in building solutions. It was always, I'm a shortcutter. I like to find the simplest way to do something, right? And this is not always there, so you need to try and develop that. And I've been involved in a few different products over the years. I then left Symantec and decided to create my own product, which we kicked off the ground, which does the left side of the EDRM discovery. And while doing that, I was also a director within a Swiss bank here in Switzerland under UBS, and I was handling a team of business analysts looking at how discovery was done, looking at the products and the roadmaps of that going forward, and especially change management, right? And that got me into cross-border data flow, and dealing with lawyers, finding out why can we not get the data from here to there and who needs to approve it. And that got me very deep into the GDPR side. Of course, data privacy is nothing new to us in Switzerland, but really, how do we move that across? And then dealing with schools as well, where we're looking at the privacy of the data that they hold and where are they storing it. The cloud is the cloud, right? For a long time, people weren't realizing where data was housed. So there was also a large part of my interest in that area. And then moving on there, just really moving into an advisory role to look across the board, to utilize the experience I've had in all the different verticals. And through the years, something I didn't mention, I also helped with a few companies within the knowledge management space, which for me, it was a clean switch kind of from IG to knowledge management, because I was dealing with issues where you can categorize and bring together cataloging of data, but if you're not involving people, it was a major issue. And that kind of interested me more over the years to really get involved in the people side. And that's my cut across then to the knowledge management, and how I distinguish the two is you have to have IG. Knowledge management is understanding the business side. And it's only when these two get married together that something special occurs.
All right, well, hold on a second. Let me carve out some of these questions. You're already asking all of my questions, JT. So, all right, let's first and foremost, I think, I was really curious, which is why I pulled this group together, because I really wanted to understand where the intersection of information governance and knowledge management meet, and because those are questions that I'm curious. And if I'm curious about it, I guarantee you there are people at the executive level and people that are responsible for data and building programs that have the same questions. So let me start with Bob. So Bob, you've written the book. So how would you succinctly define information governance for someone that's just coming into it?
The most succinct definition I have is security, control, and optimization of information. So you want to secure it within and even externally from the enterprise. As you share data, there are techniques and tools where, for instance, information rights management, where if someone leaves and they have 10,000 documents on a laptop and that's your confidential information, and how do you get it back? Well, information rights management can go out when they try to open up those files. If you shut off access, can go to the cloud or to a server and say, does this person still have access? Nope, we terminated them. It can go do a virtual shredding. So you can actually control information even after it leaves the organization.
Mhm.
So security, control information internally and externally. Internally against bad actors. Externally, of course, trying to prevent breaches. So you want to identify your most valuable information, your most confidential information, and spend more money and effort locking it down with tools like encryption. And then optimization, which is the value side of it, trying to extract new value, data monetization techniques using infonomics principles, minimizing information risks and costs and maximizing its value. My longer definition, other than security control and optimization of information, my longer definition is information governance is the practice of minimizing information risks and costs while maximizing information value. Of course, there are a lot of other pieces to it. If you try to encompass it, you end up with a paragraph.
Right.
So
Well, it's a good paragraph, and I think that's where the intersection is, right, JT? Where optimization and getting knowledge is that where you start seeing where the knowledge management piece kicks in?
I mean, knowledge management starts from people, process, technology, right? And the technology side being how people can interact with the knowledge that they have. Um, the biggest holes we have in organizations today, I think, going off that example, is if somebody leaves the organization, yes, we need to release that data that was on their machine. But before that happens, we also need to ensure that we capture the knowledge that they had created over that period in time. Otherwise, you get these holes of knowledge or experience that the firm has gained over that period, right? And the only way that it gets down to that point is by looking at it from a people perspective to see how departments interact, right? Look at really the work process and the procedures by which that department interacts with itself, but also interacts with outside. And then being able to get people access to the information which is going to help them and drive efficiency and these pieces, as you were saying there. But get people more comfortable. A lot of the time you start a position, you're going to have to ask people, how do I get to this piece of data? Or I'm trying to do this, which I need to do for my job. Where is it now? And a lot of the answers are, oh, well, that was the guy who you took over the position from. He's now left. We have the shared drives, but actually a lot of the stuff he was working on was there. So to really drive the respect for knowledge that's being created so that people add it to central pools that can be then utilized by the organization going forward.
So I guess that leads me to, in general, so say, for example, I'm an executive, or I'm trying to build a program, and I know I need to be aware of IG, and I need to be aware of knowledge management, and you guys are the top of my people to help me build this. How do you guys start actually working together and communicating? Are you part of is knowledge management part of information governance team, or information governance, is that you mentioned the seagull role earlier, Bob. Where does all that fit from an organizational perspective?
Well, when I talk about constructing your information governance steering committee, we certainly want all of those participants that are represented in the IG reference model. So you want someone from, a leader from IT, from legal, from business, from privacy and security, and from records management, or RIM. But also sometimes in some organizations that should include a person that is the head of knowledge management. Because really, I see it's sort of like you can't have privacy without security first, cybersecurity. I see you can't have good knowledge management without good information governance first, because you have to be able to organize and classify and find that information, like Jason was referring to, and then be able to leverage it, understand which information is worth keeping, what information you can discard. That's where part of that is a records management function, but part of it's going to be a knowledge management function where you decide, how to prioritize the knowledge that's been accumulated in the organization.
Yeah. Right. What do you think, JT?
Exactly that. I mean, you hit a couple of really good points there. When I approach an organization, I mean, knowledge management was an advertising keyword used to cover over information governance for a lot of years. The actual side of knowledge management is really taking the people in the process. So in a true knowledge management, when I enter an organization, most of the time they have an information governance department. Those are the first people I go to, right?
You
Because they've
do?
already done they've already done this work. They've gone through, they've interviewed people, they know a lot about the file systems and those kinds of pieces. But what I find is, as knowledge management grows over time and becomes mature in knowing more from the business side and the workflow of that, we can then update back to our knowledge to information governance, which can help them then categorize things even further. Right? You can take a piece of data and know what the value is of that information for the organization, but how do you capture things like time capsule information? I call it time capsule, but it's these pieces which are very important for an organization, which may otherwise get deleted over time based on normalized rules, which only people know that this is important in one way or another, and a lot of the time very closed within their little circle in their position. And those things can then get updated, and we can grow a much stronger information governance over time. How departments interact by opening rights between them. The people who do that is through security, and who controls that is information governance, right? So there has to be a really tight partnership with that. A lot of the time I try and reduce my workload by looking at the analysis done within the InfoGov side already.
So what kind of knowledge or resources can you usually give to someone like JT, Robert, when you're working on an information governance program? What are the kind of things that you try to identify that you can, collaborate with someone like on the knowledge management side?
Well, you want to look at the high value information. We were doing um, an, a, a, an assessment of information governance practices in an organization that very high revenue per employee, $1 billion of revenue, only 1,000 employees, a lot of revenue, and but they couldn't find anything. They couldn't. They had no underlying business classification scheme, no metadata strategy, and so there was one guy down in the basement that they could find just about anything, but they were taking 3 weeks to produce information for regulators that regulators said you should be able to do this in 15 minutes. It should all be organized online. Search, boom, find it, right? And it was just so disorganized because it's kind of like everybody was using their own filing system and there was no standard across the organization. Well, in going department by department and doing investigation, we found out that this is a pipeline company that's kind of quasi part of the U.S. infrastructure, so they're quasi controlled or heavily controlled by the government. So they're a pipeline that ships gasoline and airline fuel from Texas to New York to New Jersey. And we found out that there's one small department there of business analysts that they know the orders that are coming in from the airlines, and they know the demand and the volume and the intricacies of that and what's happening. And that's very valuable information for Wall Street investors, for hedge funders. And then we looked at the security protocols they had in place, and they really didn't have much. And I thought, oh my God, this is information that's super valuable that they're not spending, really any extra effort or time in controlling and securing. So we would look for high value information like that, and then look for ways to work with a knowledge management team to be able to leverage that over time.
JT, how would you find knowledge out of that case scenario?
I mean, they're doing a lot of the legwork for us already, the high value areas, right? It's the same thing. The next people that we normally go to from an IG perspective is anybody who's involved in disaster recovery, if they don't have a good IG. It's really trying to find, as you said now, Robert, those high value areas of information that are there. From that, I can then go to these people and find out what makes their position special. What is the things that they're creating outside of the official documents that they're passing from one point to another? And a lot of the time you start to dig up these pockets of knowledge from that person. It's really an extraction from that person's experience to be able to put that down as part of that workflow, that procedure that they're going through every day, and seeing what would make life easier for them. If they're busy entering data and they're always having to look back to one area or another area, that's then when we would start to tweak how they are working together, whereas the IG side would know exactly that this information is important and should be secured or saved in a certain way. So they tie really perfectly together. And from in my mind anyway, the knowledge management is more people process, and the technology side is then the connection over to the major other systems, into IG, into archive, into however you're going to utilize that space behind. And then the last piece is, from a knowledge management perspective, a lot of the issue that we have today, I mean, there's a classic example at a client that I've dealt with recently, where they have an area where they save information to, which is their shared drive. Everybody does that, to the shared drive. But then they said, okay, we're going to implement SharePoint. They're halfway through implementing SharePoint. And somebody else said, oh, we're going to also do OneDrive. So there's another department that does OneDrive. Now they've got all that space. And I'm picking on this because you said standardization. This is so key, right? And then suddenly this whole epidemic, this pandemic hits, and going to Teams. Now everybody's in Teams, sharing files on Teams. And now they've got Teams and email and shared drive and SharePoint and OneDrive, and SharePoint is maybe in Teams, but there's a lot of, now everything's all over the place.
And
so
bots.
The first thing is exactly.
And bots. This one account I was talking to you about, they had people just going out, to get around the restrictions from IT. They were just starting to use bots, completely ungoverned.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, exactly. Dropbox or whatever they can do to do it, and users will do that, right? People will take the straightest line between 2 points. And I think that the major role of knowledge management is to realign how people are saving information, or utilize more their automatic way of saving something. Very easy thing is file save as, right? To only give them the options there that they need to, that you would like them to save to. This is a very easy way to drive standardization. Because you can scream and shout with standardization and come at it with sticks, but if you don't have the carrots to let people know if you're going to save it in this way and drive them towards that, and they start to find things easier and they start to have that experience, and then we lock down that experience so that doesn't change, and allow the technology behind to be able to change, or get organizations ready for innovation behind the scenes, but the user front end doesn't change. Because Joe Soap in the marketing department doesn't care where the data is. What he cares about is that he can instantly find it. And I think lastly onto that, I wanted to put in, we've been so concentrated on saving information over time. The reason for standardization is the issue of finding the stuff once you've saved it, right? And that's exactly a job, that is a direct connection between knowledge management and IG. Is how do I get hold of it in a quick enough time frame for the position I hold, for my role, right? And that when I leave, that doesn't change, right?
Well, I'm curious now in terms of just getting both of your perspectives as we're kind of wrapping up here, because I've got two more things I want to cover with you guys. So I guess my first question is Robert, how do I buy information governance? Is it a technology? Is it a box? Is it a person? Is it a combination thereof? And the same thing's for you, JT, on the knowledge management side. But we'll start with Robert first.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I would term it more like, how do you buy in to information governance? Because really it's a program. You could think of it as like an information workplace safety program. Just like a workplace safety program where you have material safety data sheets in a chemical plant, it's constantly reinforced with posters, training, classes, newsletters, maybe even some creative stuff. Maybe they have gamified a little bit. Have you taken your security awareness training? And if you did today, you get 4 points. If you take it tomorrow, you get 2 points. And have a leaderboard. But you have to buy into it. It really has to be a buy-in from the executive level, because research has shown that executive sponsorship is the #1 factor, the leading factor in success of IG programs, because you've got all these different moving parts and you've got all these functional areas. You're trying to herd these cats, and and they don't necessarily report to the executive sponsor. They might be in IT, legal, records management, knowledge management, wherever, and you have to collaborate. You want to pound out, get some good, vigorous discussion, and you're going to have disagreements, and you want to have healthy disagreements, but then you want to hammer those out and come to a consensus as you move forward with an IG steering committee. So it's not a technology you can buy. It's not a Band-Aid you can put on to fix something. It's an ongoing process that you continually reinforce and expand and deepen throughout the organization. And you can do that with strong executive leadership, but also you're going to have to tie your program to business objectives. So what are the business objectives of the IG program? If those are aligned with the business objectives of the organization, then everything you do in your IG program is helping the organization move toward its business objectives. So you're going to get more executive support. Just for instance, that example I gave you earlier, that very healthy and profitable company was looking to make some acquisitions. And they couldn't really make acquisitions with a messy in-house, information technology setup. They can't find what they need to find. So they really need to clean house first. Then they would have some tools to actually be able to analyze prospective acquisition targets and see, well, can we believe their information? How strong is their IG program? And so in that case, the more you do in the IG program, the more it fits with corporate objectives and helps them move forward, and you'll get executive support. Now, of course, you have to have some technologies. There are some key enabling technologies that are often used in information governance programs, like file analysis or software for data mapping, which is really sort of the first step in a privacy program, but it's also often the first step in an IG program. You need to inventory your information assets. You need to understand what you have and where it lives before you can manage it. So it's really not something you can buy. It's a combination of technologies depending on the scenario, but it's also a lot of training and reinforcement and leadership at the executive level.
So no RFP.
No, an RFP, when it comes to, you'll have this umbrella of IG, and then you may have discrete projects underneath that umbrella. So yeah, you'll have an RFP for a new, for instance, legal hold system or something, or you might have an RFP for a digital signature software to eliminate some bottlenecks. So you'll be implementing some smaller discrete projects, and you want to do those smaller ones and get those quick wins to get some momentum, because IG programs are notorious for sort of losing steam and failing because people don't see the results. So you have to get some quick wins. You have to show executive management that it's worth it, and keep the momentum going.
And a 10-year budget. I'm sure that would help, right?
That'd be great.
Yeah. How about you, JT? How do I buy me some knowledge management?
You need the IG side first. If I see the growth of an organization from, let's say, all the way from medium size, you already need a very strong IG department. What perplexes me is that organizations, if we look back way before digital, were spending a huge amount of money on filing, on putting things away in the correct way. Nobody would walk up to the filing clerk and give them their family pictures or discuss a conversation about one thing or another, which we're able to do today. But the fact that this hasn't happened, and the fact that you have to fight so hard over the years, I think it's getting much easier in the last, let's say, 10 years, as data is becoming such a heavy thing to manage and handle, and you can see those quick wins and efficiencies that you can gain very quickly. It does become a bit easier, but I would like to see that respect grow in exponentially, right? Because the effect that you can have when people can work together correctly, when their relationships one-to-one is one side, but the relationships in information or their knowledge relationships is extraordinarily important. And if you want to buy into knowledge management, it's really about driving that efficiency between departments, or when you're doing those exercises, be thinking about KM as well, be thinking about your knowledge management as well, in not only how does this department work together and what is the best way that we can get to the end result faster or more efficiently, but how do I manage the data of the input and the output for each one of those people to drive towards that end result, and then update back to IG on that, and have that close collaboration. The other point that you mentioned now from an IG side, which for me is very much the same, is that these mindset changes, to have these posters and pieces around, which a lot of the time is done for fire, security, for the building, and now we're starting to see a lot more IG and respect for data coming along, but that needs to be coupled with respect for knowledge between departments and within the organization, where IG is handling risk and the management of the data for the whole organization, to really come down to allow people to change their mindset and how they react with each other, right? So how do you buy a KM? You get on the back of utilizing the work that you've done already. If you've done DR work, you go to your IG department if you have it already, and you work with them to gain that information. And then with that knowledge, start to pick out users within the organization. And you said it exactly right, get buy-in. Where IG needs buy-in from executive level, knowledge management has to be the friend in the room. It has to be something that when Jason Velasco comes to me and says, I can't find this, he knows he can come to me as a trusted person. I can say, well, why can't you find it? What are you trying to do? What is the position where you are? And have a central place to go and look that up, right? And that's kind of the future of where we're going. A lot of the pushback we always get from business is, well, I can go to Google and look something up and I find it straight away. Why can't we have the same thing? Well, because
Google doesn't care about your privacy.
Well, one thing, but the other side is we can have the same thing, but we need to understand the organization better. We need to have a strong IG so that when we put these things in place, it's not a case of everybody finding everything. There was a point where we had a really nice desktop search engine, which I don't want to mention the name now, but you had people very excited about it. We're going to go switch it on, it's index everything. We can find everything, yeah? But everybody can find everything. Why? Because you didn't have a strong enough IG who's connected to security, connected through knowledge management to the business side itself. And lastly, the most successful projects I've seen in knowledge management is driven by communication within the organizations, driven by that interaction between departments and between business.
Interesting. All right, so I'm going to wrap up with my favorite bit that I've been playing around with, because for those that know me, I'm a huge Star Wars and science fiction nerd a little bit. So I've been playing around with the concept of I don't know if people watch, but there's a great animated show called Clone Wars, which is the intersection between the prequels and the canon movies. And I call it the Clone Wars quote of the day, because they always start the episode with a Clone Wars quote. And so the quote that I have, and I would like you to apply this to the intersection of information governance and knowledge management, is, I love this, because this is a random one, guys. I pulled these completely from random. The easy path to wisdom for those is not blinded by ego. Let me repeat that again, because I love this, because I think this fits nicely what we have, right? So the easy path to wisdom for those is not blinded by ego. So, Robert, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I'm an egomaniac, so I don't have a very easy path to wisdom, I guess.
How about you, JT?
Well, I mean, I have to bring it back to KM. That's the one stumbling point we have in any business. When you come, and all of us have experienced that, when you come across a person who's unwilling to help, because if they give you the information, they might lose their job because they're not needed anymore. It's a very big ego point. And I think we see that very often as those stumbling blocks, and we need to try and get around that and let them know to drop the ego, because it's going to make their life easier and in fact probably enhance their position more. And to try and turn that into something positive is always difficult. So I like that quote.
And I just want to say one thing, Jason, to circle back, and this is kind of maybe in the weeds, but I think it's an important point, which is a good, well-designed taxonomy is really a foundation in knowledge management to be able to find, index and find what you want. But it's also the foundation in information governance to be able to organize and classify, categorize information. And so there's very much a tie there, a link between how well developed and updated and fine-tuned your taxonomy is for information governance purposes as well as KM.
Gotcha. And so I guess, Robert, thank you very much for joining us. JT, I guess, Robert, for those that don't know you, I guess, how do people get in touch with you and how do they find you?
Yeah, you could just go to igtraining.com or you can send me an email at rs@igtraining.com. On Twitter, I'm at Robert Smallwood. And then I also have the magazine. If you see the magazine behind me, that's Information Governance World Magazine, IG World. So you can go to infogovworld.com, and I will announce here today for the first time that we're going to be holding a major conference September 14th to 17th called InfoGov World 2021. And it'll be in 3D virtual reality. And we're going to have 12 hours a day. So we're going to start at 11 a.m. London time. We're going to cover UK and Europe. And we're going to go all the way till 11 p.m. London time, which is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. So we'll start out with UK and European content, and then we'll gradually move to US and Canadian content as those 2 days progress. So hopefully you guys will join us and maybe be speakers at that conference, and be looking out for more details. It'll be available soon.
We're very excited, Robert. And we'll definitely include those in the notes to this and make sure that we're sharing that, because I mean, again, I've seen your content. It's rock solid. So I think this would be a great event for people to have. So we'll definitely support you as best as we can. How about you, JT? How do people find you besides in Switzerland?
eDiscovery Advisory. You can find us on the website, jason.thompson@ediscoveryadvisory.com.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And for those that are following us on YouTube or one of the other streams, like and subscribe to our channel. And we look forward to the next episode of Out of Curiosity. Thank you very much.
Robert,
Very good.
it was an honor. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye.